사실 Good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to see the turnout tonight, and makes me really pleased to see that we're so passionate and we care about our children. And thank you for Albuquerque schools, public schools, for providing this space and this forum to hear everybody out and to really listen to the community. My name is Rebecca Riley. I am a parent of a second grader in Albuquerque, and I've had also a son that was in the APS school system for 6 years. And I really support and appreciate public schools and what they do, and all the teachers and all the administrators and what they do to provide us the best education that they can, or with the tools that they have for our children. By profession, I'm the director of Tribal Home Visiting Program, a nonprofit organization here called Native American Professional Parent Resources. So my expertise and my training as a health educator, community health educator, but also in the early childhood has been for more than 8 years. So early childhood education is a passion of mine, and something that I involve myself heavily in. From the Pueblo of Acoma, my children are also from the tribes of Pengus Pueblo, Isleta, and we live here in Albuquerque, but we've lived some time on the reservation, so we've had both experiences of what limited resources or what it's like to live here in Albuquerque. So that's just kind of who I am and what I bring. I think the first thing that I just wanted to make a point about is, we have to really think about the words that we use and the words that we say. And so one thing that came to mind that I really wanted to bring across was the word of competency. Competency really stresses the point that you're an expert in something. And I wouldn't expect anybody in this room to claim that they're an expert in culture. We're all continuing to be learners. Our educators are learners, our students are learners. And so I feel like we really need to change the perspective in the words that we use, because that kind of drives what we do going forward. My suggestion up there was to use more words around cultural relevancy, cultural humility trainings, or cultural diversity trainings. And these are things that are already in existence. We do cultural diversity and cultural humility trainings for our staff at APS, and across a lot of home visiting, early childhood programs, they use these terms too. So it's already known and accepted that these trainings need to happen. They are happening. So I would like to see APS also incorporate that into their values of their teachers. The second thing was that was especially disturbing to me, because my son, he's 14 years old now and much taller than me, has never cut his hair, pretty much, except for a trim. He's always kept his hair long ever since he was a baby. And he attended Susie Reyes Mormon, which was, by experience, a really great experience, because they really stressed to their teachers the acceptance of all children. They have a high number of Native American children that go there, and created a community of urban natives at the school. And so, he had a really good experience. And so when I saw what happened on the news regarding the students at Cibola, it was really disturbing. It was really disturbing. It was almost a personal attack on my family. And so it made me think at that time, we really need to change, or we need to ask that APS really change how they hire and screen educators. I feel like that situation could be totally preventable in how you hire and screen your staff. I do the same thing too. I know it's really hard. I know it's hard to find good people and find a good fit for who are going to educate our children, who are going to be with our children. But that needs to be proactive. Those are preventative measures that you can do now to screen for behaviors that do not foster racism, intolerance, prejudice, all those things. So I think a rigorous hiring process needs to be reevaluated. And then finally, the third thing I want to just stress is that we really need to ensure that APS is fulfilling its obligations according to the Indian Education Act. That should be the guiding force for all educators and school systems across the state. I mean, it's law. It's law that you provide all those things that we ask for our children. So it's not about debate. You're required to by the U.S. government in relation to tribal governments to fulfill these things for Native people that have had to really deal with them for centuries. I think that just needs to be acknowledged, that these things have been in existence not just as a current issue. They are century-long issues that have been basically instilled in the genes in our children. So if we can come to terms with that and have an understanding by non-Native people of where we've been, because that's not been addressed, that's not said enough. And I think that's why we get the energy that we get from when people get really frustrated and angry. I get really frustrated and angry too. We need to have more frank conversations like this. So I really do appreciate APS for allowing us to do this.
Thank you, Rebecca. Very well said. We have till 7 o'clock, so we like to keep in mind that we're on a time frame, so that if we can move forward, it's important that we get your thoughts and we get your feelings, and that they're able to provide direction. Because my hope for coming out of this meeting are going to be some definitive actions taken by Albuquerque Public Schools. So I think it's very important. But if we could be concise in our comments, I think that would really help us to move the agenda forward. Thank you.
I'll try. Camille Vados. I'm here as a mother, as a grandmother, as a retired teacher from APS, but I've gone back into the classroom, but in a different setting, subbing for charter schools and academies. And I'm seeing, wow, some differences, some goodness, and some, how I can look at the both entities. But some of the academies and charters are also, to renew their charters, they're applying to get APS affiliation. Well, that's one situation. And I think we have to look at what that is in terms of budget. If we're going to, if APS and along with PED is going to consider charters, absolutely, because you're sharing resources. But, look at what that represents. That's one thought. But I'm going to share, hopefully, a quick story about my little granddaughter. And hopefully I don't cry, but I will. Because she's an amazing 5-year-old child. And she's in a public APS setting. And she spends time with me because I raise my kids in a free-spirited situation. And this is my daughter. She's a product of her own environment and her upbringing as an individual and what that represents. But my little granddaughter, she said, "Grandma, my teacher said I'm not normal." And I thought, wow, what do you mean? Well, I can't write the letters right. I can't, come up with the answers to the numbers. And when we're setting curriculum, it's so important to see the age groups and to know, like, my children had a lot of nonverbal communication, the eye contact, what that's about. Eventually, they are great orators, they're attorneys, but it took time. And if I wasn't in that classroom, or if their father was not in the classroom making drums and, skinning sheep, they wouldn't be, I don't think, where they are today. But I think we need to look at, if we're going to be looking at preschool education and K through 12, we have to look at not just numbers and not just letters, because I was a gifted teacher. I didn't even know what gifted meant. But our beautiful children are gifted with factors, and all kids have gifts. And it's not even just looking at Indigenous, it's looking at all children in a beautiful and holistic and spiritual way, and let them flourish without all the testing and without all the numbers, because they will eventually be there. Thank you.
Hello, I am Nicole Shaw. I have 3 students in APS, and I also went to school at APS when I was in elementary and middle school. So I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for hosting this. Hopefully, you know, we got to start a late start. I think, you know, giving us a 7 o'clock time when we didn't get the full hour is not very appreciated. I hope that we do get the full hour to express ourselves and make a public comment. But I reviewed the packet that was provided with the agenda, and I don't see any commitment for additional funding for Indian Ed. And that's what I would like to see. You know, there's more outreach, more communication, those commitments, but I don't see any commitment for funding. And that is really important. I mean, if you don't have a commitment for funding, how are you going to do all this stuff? I mean, at this point, it's just words. And we need to do more than that. It needs to be backed up with funding to the Indian Ed department, and that was another thing. I started attending the Indian Parent Committee meetings. We have all these ideas on how, you know, and it's unfortunate because our Indian Ed department, going to these meetings, hearing about the budget, they don't have the funding. They don't have the staff. They need these things to complete these initiatives, and they should be involved. You know, there are representatives. We have a parent committee meeting. I didn't even hear about this meeting until I happened to run into a parent committee member. You know, and there wasn't even that outreach. I don't know how notice of this forum was even done. I didn't get anything from the district, directly from the district, and I know I am on those mailing lists. I get everything else, and it's like, where is this notice? And there's just that. There's not a visible presence of Indian education, and that trickles down to the parents and the students. And I think, you know, Indian education is important across the board because we aren't visible, you know, and APS needs to, I'm hoping that there's a better commitment to inform everybody, especially because of incidents, because, you know, this K through 12 education, you see it in a previous opinion stated, it starts from the little kids. You know, my daughter had an experience when she was in 3rd grade of another student, you know, apparently learned a stereotype about Native Americans, and she was attacked with it at school. My little kid, you know, he's growing his hair, and it's the same thing, you know. There's all these negative perceptions, and nobody in the school district is teaching them otherwise, unless it becomes an issue. And that's not right, you know. Albuquerque is surrounded by Native American communities. These pueblos, every single pueblo opens up their pueblo to the public at least once a year. And there's none of that. None of that is known. I mean, people here in Albuquerque don't even know that. I've even had to correct the news because they even run a negative article, and it's like there's sovereignty issues, you know, and nobody knows these things yet. You're surrounded by it, and that's very unfair. And again, it trickles down to the funding. I hope there's more funding to, I mean, there's a commitment for funding, especially because of the Yazzie and Martinez. The part of that legislation is that more funding goes to districts with Native American students. And so far, I haven't seen anything yet. I hope something comes out. And another thing, but one of my points was we need more outreach, more communication to Native American parents and their students. We need a better network, and I would like to see that come out of the Indian Ed department, because Indian Ed is buried. They're buried within all the other departments, and they have a very small budget. Most of their funding comes from federal grants that they go out and get, and that's not right. So I really hope there's better commitment and better communication. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Ed Silversmith. Try to keep this under 5 minutes. I'm recently retired. Did 23 years in the military. I'm currently enrolled at UNM as an engineering student. I have 3 kids currently in secondary primary school, and one just recently graduated. He's going to school at UNM. So I spent most of my career in Europe and the Pacific, away from the United States and from my people, the Navajo people and other native people. So moving back, I had to, it was a culture shock for me, as well as learning about a lot of these instances which had happened, which I was appalled at seeing coming back to my country, and also to a place where there are many natives surrounding this area. So I was appalled and disappointed in the professionals out there, which I know that students and, correction, the staff of schools and teachers are of the highest form of professionals. So I was definitely disappointed to know that this had happened, and I was also surprised that there wasn't any type of cultural competency training for natives, about natives, for teachers. One quick story. I talked to a Dodds teacher in Japan. The English teacher had maneuvered the conversation on the subject of how Native Americans don't have any problems anymore. Everything's equal. At the time, I could not respond intelligently because I did not know about history and what had happened. But last year, I took a Native American Studies class, just a one-on-one class, which did inform me about colonialism and the atrocities that had happened and the difficulties that are still, that Native Americans still have and are going through. So I learned something, and I thought, you know, only if I could go back and talk to that teacher and tell them that there are still a lot of difficulties for us, and Native Americans are still indeed disenfranchised in many areas. So moving forward, I just want to make sure I emphasize a couple of suggestions that I put on stickies up there for cultural competency training. In the training that I have experienced in the Air Force, which ranges from sexual assault to just safety training, I want to make sure, well, one thing that I found was very key was when they mentioned real life incidences, removing all the details and names, but I learned from those, and also it's important that those weren't forgotten, those instances weren't forgotten. So I want to make sure I emphasize that that stays within the cultural competency training. As far as indigenous curriculum, I assume that's for the students, or to include the students. So in there, I think it's important to make sure that the students are aware of a process of reporting instances like this. I mean, this was an instance where they cut the hair and everybody knew, and the parents knew about it. So I'm wondering how many other small instances out there that have gone unreported. So I think it's important that the students know and they feel comfortable to report. And that's about it. Thank you for this time.
Carly Lehman Unisha, Vidani Michelin, Kachini Bashichin, and Kachini Kashiche, Kiani Dishman. Hi, my name is Carly Lehman. I graduated from APS about 11 years ago now. And my experience was much different than what the students are going through. But I want to talk about the lack of communication from APS. The way I heard about this was through the Albuquerque Journal. It wasn't communicated to us. I've talked to many people, from school board members to the principal to APS, and nobody reached out regarding this issue and regarding this forum. And then they haven't communicated with any of the families involved. They haven't communicated with the ACLU at all. we have no guideline of what's going on right now, and even the agenda that was put out, we weren't able to look at it prior to it being put out, so we couldn't come prepared to this meeting with everything we wanted. And I also want to talk about the accountability that APS, the students, and the teachers need to have. And then I also want to talk about the frustration process of trying to submit a complaint with APS. I Googled a long time that the day it happened, I could not find any information. I was told to fax, then I was told to do another formal complaint. So that's 2 complaints, which shouldn't need to happen. There's also the frustration of sitting down and talking to an APS staff member, and the staff member is telling me and one of the students that the retaliation, the harassment that's happening to Native students is a life lesson, that this is something they're going to go into life having to deal with. And if you send your kids to APS, how can you, their safety, it's all about their safety, and an APS staff member is telling you this is a life lesson. This is what you experience in real life. And then I also want to talk about how there was an incident in California. There was an incident in New Jersey. They took immediate action. Why didn't we get that from APS? Is it because the student was a minority? Was it because the student was Native American? And then the way APS handled it when they gave their letter, it was very, there was no empathy in it. It was a snip. Regardless of how much hair you cut, it's not a snip. It's a haircut. To Native American people, your hair is so sacred. And then for them to say culturally insensitive, it was a racist act. It was out of race. The student was a person of color. It was racism. Just call it what it is. And that's just my frustration with APS and lack of communication with the ACLU. We waited almost 30 days for them to respond to the ACLU, and to this day, I know that they still haven't reached out and communicated with the ACLU even about this forum.